This is the first time I've given the program via Zoom, so bear with me while I get it up and going. Come on. Well, it looks like I may have to pause the share to get the slides going. Sorry about that. Well, I think I'm going to have to restart my my photos program to get it going again. So Randy Pinkston and I hope that we get to do the trip again in 2021. We don't know for sure. Because who knows what exactly is going to happen with coronavirus. But if it's safe to go. If it's safe to go, we will. So we know that this year, not much. You know, Alaska's tourism industry is a big part of Alaska's economy, and there's not going to be much tourism in Alaska this year because of COVID-19. But if you know, if developments take place that make it so that it's safe to travel again, and that will include, you know, adequate testing, contact tracing, and probably also vaccine development, then we'll go. But we'll see. We probably won't know until sometime in the fall or winter. So the attraction for birders, and somebody tell me, let me see, I'm going to need to do screen sharing again. Get it going again. Okay, did I get it? Is somebody still on? Did I get it shared now? Okay. I'm going to assume that it's being shared. So the attraction for birders from Texas is that there are a lot of birds up in Alaska that that you hardly ever get to see in Texas. There are some very familiar beaks, if you will, like this American robin in a park in Anchorage, Alaska. You know, it's a familiar face or beak in a kind of an unfamiliar setting. The sign has dog sleds only. You're not going to see a sign like that too many times in Texas. Then there are some birds that, like this this long-tailed duck that I photographed in, I think, Kleberg County a couple of winters ago, that you see them occasionally in Texas, but here's a long-tailed duck from Alaska that's like really different. I've got a, okay, minimize that. Okay, there we go. Long-tailed ducks in the summer in Alaska are pretty awesome. Then there are some birds like this Arctic tern, which you can see all over the place in Anchorage and many other parts of Alaska, which would be a real rarity almost anywhere in Texas. But in Alaska, they're easy to see and actually pretty easy to get good photographs of, like this at Potter Marsh in Anchorage. And then there are a few birds that you probably never, ever, ever going to see in Alaska, like this Aleutian tern. And you have to get up kind of close to the Aleutians to see this bird. And this is a bird that we get in Nome. We had it in 2017, and we had great looks in 2019. So one thing about Alaska is it's really big. And this is a lesson that I learned as a cocky teenager who grew up in Texas and was real proud of that and everything Texan, and visiting family in another state. I got taken down a few pegs when someone told me, oh yes, that he had heard, someone about my age told me, yes, he had heard that they were thinking about dividing Alaska in two and making Texas the third largest state. And I was shocked and dismayed and chagrined to learn that it was true. Here you can even see in the text, 2.3 times the size of Texas. Here it is. There is on a map of the U.S. Alaska's really big. Alaska, this is a map of Alaska that shows kind of the major sort of habitat zones, if you will. There's a substantial portion of Alaska that is truly in the Arctic. There's this transitional part there. Part on the south that's temperate coastal rainforest in northwestern North America, and it gets up almost to Anchorage down on the Alaskan Peninsula. There's this portion here that's transitional between this heavily forested zone here and the continental zone here, which is where there are a lot of mountains, some forest, but a lot of grasslands and tundra. And we visit in this Alaska trip that we do on the itinerary that former TOS President Jim Hailey developed. We visit all four of those locations and bird in all four of those. Here's another another map of Alaska, just giving you an idea of where things are. We fly into Anchorage, and Anchorage is kind of our base of operations. And then from Anchorage, we make separate trips. We fly from Anchorage to Nome and back, Anchorage all the way up to Barrow, which is sometimes now called Utkivik, the native Alaskan name for it, and back to Anchorage. We drive up into the continental zone. In 2017, we drove up to the Old Denali Highway, but Randy and I decided that we would make a trip actually into Denali National Park. So, 2019, we went to Denali National Park. And then we also make a short trip, and this is a trip that we drive. We rent a couple of big vans. I think I'm going to show you a photo of one of those later. And we also make a short driving trip down to the town of Seward here on the Kenai Peninsula down here, so that we can get coastal birds. And we do a day-long boat trip there to get birds out on the water. So this is a view of downtown Anchorage, looking kind of westish from what probably rightfully would be called foothills. They're the Chugach Mountains, and there's a park here that we visit. This is about a 20-minute drive from downtown Anchorage. And Anchorage is a big city. Anchorage is Alaska's largest city, and it's a city of almost 300,000. Anchorage has attractions like Gwinny's Old Alaska Restaurant. Here, this is a mural on the side of the building. And Randy and I are fond of Gwinny's, and it's walking distance from the hotel that we stay in when we're based in Anchorage. So we visit Gwinny's probably more often than most trip participants would really prefer. There's a photograph of me standing outside Winnie's. Notice I got my reusable cup for hot or cold beverages. And here's one of Winnie's infamous signs: come into Winnie's and get paddled, whatever that means. I think they're referring to this paddle of, you know, a flight of craft beers that you can sample. So in 2019, TAS member Jeff Patterson and part of the SparrowFest team went with us, and Randy Pinkston, me, Jeff. Here we are in Gwinny's. I think our first night in Alaska. Jeff got in. We all got there. Having, you know, brew. Weebies is one of the little local spots. They serve pretty good burgers and fries, and you can also get a burger made. I think you can get a bison burger, and I think you can also get an elk burger there if you want it, and they make pretty good shakes. Jim Hailey always made at least 2 stops there. We cut it to 1, but people still kind of like Weebies. It's not hard to get good coffee in Anchorage, and actually Nome and Seward are pretty good too. But in Anchorage, and even on the highways out of town, there are these little coffee kiosks just about everywhere, and each one has their own little, you know, decor, and they've got different names, but they all serve great coffee. The one within walking distance of the hotel we stay at is the Black Bear, and so Randy and I would make trips to the Black Bear every morning. So they open up pretty early. So when we're in Anchorage, although the really most of the true specialty birds of Alaska are not really in Anchorage, they're in the other places that we visit. But for a birder from Texas, there's still some great birds that are very accessible in Anchorage. And there's a nesting colony here of Arctic terns. This is Potter's Marsh in Anchorage. It's about a 15-minute drive from the hotel. This is an Arctic tern. Do not feed the birds. Do not disturb nesting birds. Just remember that. You'll see a photo later that you might remind you of this. Well, it's a great place to photograph Arctic terns. Arctic tern. Arctic tern. And mew gulls. Mew gulls are nesting there. No ringbills in this part of Alaska. Mew gulls. Mew gulls are kind of the West Coast congener of ringbill gull. And redneck grebes are not that hard to see in Anchorage most of the time. We saw them quite a few times in the 2017 trip. It seemed that we didn't see quite as many of them in 2019, but everybody got very good looks at redneck grebe in 2019. And this photo actually I took on the 2019 trip. Greater Scaup, Westchester Lagoon, especially where this photo was taken. It's a park in downtown Anchorage, and it's an excellent place to study scaup. Both greater and lesser scaup occur there regularly. This greater scaup drake and greater scaup hen were putting on a great show. I think I photographed these birds in 2017. But we saw both species of scaup in 2019. And every once in a while, something really, really rare will turn up in Anchorage, and we'll still be there when we're there. In 2019, now this is a photo that one of Randy's friends took, but this is a falcated duck, which is a vagrant. It's a European bird, Asian bird, that even in Alaska, it's a vagrant. And one had been present for a couple of weeks at Potter's Marsh in Anchorage. And Randy and I were able to get everybody on the bird. We didn't have looks at it that were quite this good that I remember, but everybody got scope views of the bird, and that was exciting. Eagle River is part of the Chugach Mountain State Park, and that's me and Randy. This is the 2017 trip when I started growing my beard, and but it looked about this, not the beard, but the park looked about the same in 2019, and it can be very good for birds. The Anchorage area, fox sparrows are regular in the summer there. And when we arrive in Anchorage, we're arriving in early June, and we're getting there right as many of the nesting birds are arriving. So I remember very distinctly from the 2017 trip in particular, the first day and a half that we were in, actually the first 2 days that Randy and I were in Anchorage, we really didn't see a lot of the local breeding birds. And by the time we made a trip to Nome, and we came back 5 days later, and a lot of birds that had been hard to find 5 days previously were now in evidence. Eagle River has nesting varied thrushes, and this is one I believe that I photographed in 2017. We didn't have a lot of great looks at this bird in 2017, but we had fantastic looks at varied thrush, multiple singing birds, and they have this wonderful ethereal, haunting song that everybody got to hear on the 2019 trip. Here's a hairy woodpecker, one of the birds that you can see in Texas, not very much here in the Austin area, and unless and until you go to Lost Pines area, and even there, they're hard to see. But they're regular most of the forested areas that we visit in Anchorage, including Eagle River Wildlife Area. Alder Flycatcher is the flycatcher that we're most likely to see in Alaska, and it's a breeding bird there. And that was one of the birds that was absent the first couple of days we were in Alaska in 2017, but everybody did get to see him and on both trips. American dipper is a bird that's pretty hard to see in Texas, but a lot of places in the Rocky Mountains and in the montane western United States, you can get dippers. But there is a park in Anchorage where there's a pair of dippers that nest regularly along a creek, and so we take the group there one afternoon to get everybody on dipper. It's a great bird. And sometimes you get really lucky and you find something. This is American three-toed woodpecker that we missed in 2017, but Randy and I stumbled onto one when we were scouting our first day in Anchorage in 2017, and we were able to take, when everybody had arrived in Anchorage, we were able to go back, make another trip back to this park and relocate the bird. And everybody got that bird. It's a pretty good bird. They're regular in many forested areas in the Anchorage area, but they're uncommon birds, and they're kind of localized, and so kind of lucky to get one. One of the other attractions of Alaska is big mammals, and I recall that in 2017, I was disappointed that we saw moose on only 3 occasions that I remember, although one of those occasions was in a yard in a suburban area about 2 blocks from the motel. There was a cow moose grazing on hip-high grass that hadn't been mowed, and she had 2 calves bedded down near her. But aside from that, we didn't get many looks at moose. In the 2019 trip, we saw moose every day except when we were in Barrow, where there are no moose. So we saw moose every single day of the trip. And this was a young bull moose that was browsing in the Eagle River area. And everybody got great looks at that. And in 2019, we had fantastic looks at black bear. This was a sow. She had 2 cubs with her. This was in the Eagle River area, and she and the cubs were foraging in this dense, low vegetation, and everybody got great looks. In 2017, we had one pretty good look at, brief but good look at black bear, but this was awesome. You know, can't guarantee that, but it's nice when it happens. So Anchorage is kind of our base, and that's where people fly into, and we meet up there. And Alaska Airlines have pretty good schedule. Man, they're kind of the Southwest Airlines of Alaska, in my view. And it's not that hard to get from Texas to Anchorage. It's a couple of really long flights. The flight from Austin to Seattle is about 4 hours, and the flight from Seattle to Anchorage is about another 4 hours. So one of them is a little more than 4 hours, and one's a little less. So it's a long ways, but you know, then you're in the big city. And then from Anchorage, we fly or drive to the other 4 locations that we visit. So this is a map that Travis Audubon member and 2019 trip participant Cindy Cannon made for me. So Cindy, thank you very much. If you're, I think Cindy's not able to attend, but this evening, but Gus is. So the first trip that we do after a day or so of birding in Anchorage is we all get on a Alaska Airlines plane and we fly up to Nome, up here on the Seward Peninsula. And Nome is right on the cusp of that transitional area here, transitional, continental, and Arctic area here. And Nome is a really great place for birds. There you go, Nome. It's the transitional and Arctic, and Nome is like about right here. Okay. And on the flight from Anchorage to Nome, you can often see Denali, Mount McKinley, right there. About the only way that I've had clear views of it. And here we are in Nome. Here I am in Nome. This again in 2017, when I didn't have the beard going quite so much. And Nome is famous among birders for birds, but it's famous among other people for gold. And so gold mining and gold mining artifacts are still a big deal there. This is in the middle of town. Big sign here in Nome. You see, it's got various places marked on here. You see Siberia, 164 miles. Yeah, you can almost see it from there. This is the church. I think it's the Lutheran church, a church in the middle of town. It's right across the street, basically, from our hotel. Here's me and Randy at the Nugget Inn, the epicenter of funk in Nome, where we like to stay. And I don't know, the look on my face seems to say, are you kidding me? We got to get up this early. So while we're this photo was taken at about 4 in the morning, 4 or 4:30. I can't remember exactly. And we're about to leave for one of our big days of birding in Nome. So in Alaska, in the summer, the parts that we visit, basically after our first or second day in Alaska, it never gets dark. So civil twilight is as dark as it gets the entire time that we're in Alaska. So this photo was taken at 4 in the morning, but it's pretty bright. There's Randy in front of the Polar Bar. Get it? Here's one of the houses just down the street from the motel. You see snowshoes, moose, gone fishing, caribou. Nome is an interesting place. And this is not one of our vehicles. This is a birder's vehicle, Coffee Dome 2017. That's one of the destinations. That's where we were about to head out to when the photo was taken of Randy and me in front of the Nugget. And this is a video. This is baggage claim.
There is Oscar. Oscar! Apparently it's in the works.
Right along the port, right?
It's opposite. Well, here you go.
Watch your noggin.
Steinke, Glenn?
Yes. Okay, so Nome is a town of, I think, about 2,000 people. And most of the people there are fishermen, Native Alaskans, probably a few government people, and actually gold miners. There are people still mining gold there. It's got a small airport, and most of the year there's not much happening. But in June, especially in early June, lots of birders from all over the world want to be in Nome, Alaska. So this tiny little airport suddenly explodes, and the baggage claim that normally, as you can see, is just a couple of little tables there and a couple of little windows, is completely overwhelmed, but everybody handled it, with aplomb. So this is a trash bird in Nome, breeding plumage, Lapland longspurs. They're a dime a dozen, and it's great because they're wonderful birds. Aleutian tern. This is one of the big attractions. We get these birds typically at Safety Sound, which is about 8 miles south of town. And this is a bird I think that I photographed in 2017. We also had great looks at Aleutian terns in 2019. Another look at Aleutian tern. It looks a little bit like a least tern, but different, and it's bigger than a least tern. Glaucous gulls are abundant in Nome. They're the most plentiful gull there. Willow ptarmigan are typically present in good numbers. We see willow ptarmigan almost every day that we're in Nome. State bird of Alaska. We call these the tundra drones. This is semi-palmated sandpiper, and they breed abundantly in Nome, and they're everywhere. And I'm sorry I don't have a video of them this evening, but they have this stiff-winged display flight, and they make these little kind of buzzing, constant buzzing noise that sounds like a little electronic ray gun. We call them Randy and I call them tundra drones. They're all over the place. Semi-palmated sandpipers. Another look. Semi-palm. Another willow ptarmigan, official state bird of Alaska, and it's got right up there, unofficial state bird of Alaska, mosquito. Yes, even the birds have to contend with mosquitoes in Alaska. Most of the time that we're in Alaska, the mosquitoes are not too bad. They get, when we're up in Nome, they're not very bothersome. If we were there 2 to 3 weeks later, they would be pretty bothersome. In Anchorage, they can be pretty bothersome. And when we visit the Denali Park area, then we have some mosquitoes there, but most of the time they're manageable. Willow ptarmigan, awesome bird. The Jaegers are really marvelous to see in Nome. Long-tailed Jaegers and parasitics. This is pretty sure that's a long-tail. That's definitely a long-tailed Jaeger. One of my favorite birds and one of my personal favorite photos. This is from 2017. And this was, I think this was on the Teller Road. But I mean, sometimes they're all over the place. We saw quite a few Jaegers in 2017, but last summer, 2019, I was just blown away by the Jaeger show. We had lots and lots of long-tailed Jaegers, and then when we got up to Barrow, we had quite a few Pomeranian Jaegers also. Here we are in 2017, I think, hiking up the hill. No, this is 2019. This is a 2019 group. So some of you, so Cindy Cannon, Gus Cannon, and Jeff Patterson were with us and Flo Rice. Flo was there too. Where are you, Flo? Somewhere in here. We're hiking up the tundra up to the top of Coffee Dome, which is a big hill, and it doesn't look that imposing from the road, but with the very wet, mucky ground and the very dense, very low, scrubby vegetation, it's quite a hike. And I think Cindy may have stayed put. I know each year we have somebody who stays put. In 2017, the people down by the van got really good looks at bristle-thighed curlew, but so did the people on top. And there are plovers there like this. I believe this is American golden plover. It's either American or Pacific. And in 2017, we had a rock ptarmigan up here. Unfortunately, we missed rock ptarmigan in 2019. And Randy and I vowed not to let that happen again. We made a decision to go for an even rarer bird, but I think if I had it do over again, I would have gone back to try to get rock ptarmigan. This is a bird that is very, I mean, it's just about impossible to get in the lower 48. This is a whimbrel, large curlew, not as big as long-billed curlew, and very similar to bristle-thighed curlew. Whimbrels breed up there. You can get good looks at them oftentimes on the top of Coffee Dome. Here's that ptarmigan again. Here's the ptarmigan in a whimbrel. Here's the ptarmigan in flight. Oh, and this is the this is the pinnacle of success on Coffee Dome. Getting to see and hear bristle-thighed curlew. This is just about the only publicly accessible place in North America where bristle-thighed curlew regularly occurs. Now you can go to Hawaii and see bristle-thighed curlew in the winter there, but they won't be doing their flight display most likely in Hawaii. But still, you know, Hawaii. So, you know, some of you may want to do that. Anyway, it's an awesome bird, and we've had it both years. I don't think Jim ever missed this bird on his trip. There's me and Randy fist bumping after bristle-thighed curlew in 2017. And there's a whimbrel right there. These are mountains. Vistas like this are, you know, they're all over the place in the Nome area. Again, happy. This is 2019. Got the beard now. 2019, happy. Here's a group photo. Here we go. There's Flo, Cindy, Jeff. There's Gus. There he is. Trying to hide. We couldn't do it. Randy, me. Okay. Some other birds that are regularly seen in Alaska, northern water thrush. They're all over the place in wet areas around Anchorage, but especially in the little creek drainages and willows around Nome. They're everywhere. Northern water thrushes. Blackpoll warbler is less common than northern water thrush. Of course, we get northern water thrushes in Texas in migration. Blackpoll warbler is a little harder to get for most of us in Texas in migration. They do occur here in central Texas, you know, regularly in small numbers in late spring. But in Alaska, they are breeders, and they can be had in riparian forested areas, deciduous forest in the Anchorage area, and also in around Nome sometimes. American tree sparrow. This is a bird that does not breed that I recall near the Anchorage area, even at high elevation, but in Nome, they're regular. And so this is a bird that we regularly get and can also be had in the Denali area. And we saw American tree sparrow multiple days in 2019. Oh, this is one of the high valence birds of a trip to Alaska. This is Arctic warbler. And the trick about getting Arctic warbler is that they arrive later than almost any other breeding bird up there. And so being up in the places that we're at in Alaska in early June gets us all those other birds. But for Arctic warbler, they aren't reliably present until somewhere between the 7th and 10th of June. We get these birds in the Denali area, but we also have gotten them both years on the Nome portion of the trip, even though we're there a smidge on the early side. but we've gotten them both years, and we're going to make sure if we go back in 2021 or whenever we go back, we're going to make sure to get Arctic warbler. And this is one of my all-time favorite birds. The common name for it is blue throat, but Randy and I like to call it the amazing blue throat because it is an amazing little bird. It's a small it's sort of like a cross between a warbler and a bluebird. It's an old world flycatcher and flycatcher family, I believe. And it's just puts on an awesome aerial and vocal display. And you can see why it's called blue throat, but I mean, it's just amazing. We get these birds on one or two of the roads out of Nome, especially the Cougar Rock Road, which is the road that includes Coffee Dome, where the bristle-thighed curlew is. And this is one of the rivers along Nome. I can't remember which river this is. They all kind of look alike. There's the Cougar Rock River. Kind of, this is the end of the Cougar Rock Road. This is the abandoned railway south of Nome. Somebody in the early 19th century had this idea that they were going to build a railway to connect Nome to the rest of Alaska, because really there are three ways to get to Nome. You can use an airplane, or you can take a boat, or in the winter you can take a dog sled, and that's about it. And they got stuck and they didn't go very far. Rough-legged hawk is a regular breeder in areas with tundra in Alaska, and we get these birds mainly in the Nome area. Although in 2019 we also had one in Barrow. This is a photograph that I took outside of our. Oh, this is a photograph. This is of Teller. So this is at the end of the Teller Road in Nome, and this is a bay right here in this little town of Teller. There are three roads that go out of Nome. Each of these roads goes about 70 miles and then kind of dead ends, and the Teller Road is one of those. And one of the big attractions at the end of the Teller Road is white-tailed wagtail. We did not drive all the way to the end of the Teller Road in 2019, and so we missed white-tailed wagtail. The day that we were planning to drive the Teller Road in 2019, we got fogged in, and we just we had some awesome birding, and including a second blue throat that we had in the fog, but we opted not to go to the end of the road. In Nome, there's one restaurant that's really capable of serving multiple groups like ours, and fortunately they serve pretty good food. And this is the eggplant parmesan that they serve there. I think the place is called Milano's. It's sort of in Alaska, these places, they're a little bit of everything. They almost always have some sort of Asian food. This place serves Italian, Korean, Chinese, and sushi. And most of it's pretty good. And this is one of the things that I don't, this is non-negotiable, Milano's, because it's the only place in town that can really take us. There is a very interesting museum in Nome that's a museum, a land bridge museum, and it has artifacts like this skull of a giant short-faced bear, which is, these things were around, 12,000 years ago, something like that, just before the big die-off that may or may not have had something to do with you know, humans coming into North America from, you know, across the land bridge. There was an American lion. There's a skull. Anyway, cool museum. But you know, when you're in the museum, you're not going to see birds. But we went to the museum on the afternoon where, you know, after we got fogged in on the Teller Road. Picture Randy, and this is what our vehicles look like after driving the roads outside of Nome. Here's where we were fogged in on the Teller Road. Randy, Paige, one of our out-of-state participants. Here's little tiny wildflowers. I do not know what they're called. If they were in Central Texas, I would call those mountain pinks, but there's something different up there. There's a field of little tiny wildflowers and more up close. And some white ones with yellow centers. Again, I don't know what these are, but they were very cool looking. And we were fogged in and we weren't seeing a whole lot of birds, so I took flower photos, including this one. So Nome is pretty awesome, and we get probably about a dozen species of birds there, that maybe not quite that many, that we're just not going to see anywhere else on the trip. And then we fly from Nome back to Anchorage, and we'll spend maybe a day in Anchorage birding and get sometimes a brown creeper like this. Golden crowned kinglet with tackling a larvae that just seems like impossibly large, but he's gonna choke it down. There's a place near in the Chugach Mountains where there's tundra area, and golden crowned sparrows breed and sing, and they're awesome, and I love it. We didn't take the whole group up there this time because we get golden crowned sparrows other places, but they're awesome. That's Eagle River Park again, and Chugach Mountains. And so after spending maybe another, you know, one day back in Anchorage, then we make the big flight up to Barrow. And Barrow is up at the top here in the Arctic zone. Barrow, get to see Denali again sometimes. And Barrow has a signpost in it, sort of like Nome's. And look, there's Austin, 3572 to Austin. Whaling is a big thing in Barrow, and also, I mean, although they are suffering from climate change up there, and the Arctic is warming faster than any other part of the planet, and so it's feeling effects of global climate change and global warming disproportionately. What has happened is that for the last couple of decades, the sea ice it gets further and further from the shore, and breaks up sooner and forms later, and it makes it much harder for them to go out and harvest whales. They harvest whales and walrus to and they eat them. They eat them, and then of course they carve the ivory. But this boat with the flag up means that they had a successful hunt. This is a photograph taken right after midnight in Barrow. Midnight sun. There it is. The sky was clouded, so you can't see the sun, but it was up there. Barrow, Ukavik. This is a slightly different spelling from what I'm familiar with, but they say that means it's the place where they hunt snowy owls. So I don't know. Arctic pizza. That's one of our hot spots. We're in Barrow for a day and a half. We spend one night in Barrow, and if we get all of the eiders pretty quickly, well, then we'll get maybe 6 hours of sleep. If we don't get the eiders quickly, we may only get 3 or 4 hours of sleep. But Arctic pizza will hit that a couple of times. And like every place up there, Arctic pizza, they have pizza, but they also have Chinese food. The woman who owns it is Chinese, and she makes pretty darn good Chinese food. And here's what happens to vehicles in the winter. They get stuck in the snow, and then you just have to wait for the thaw to get them out again. And same thing with boats. This is up on the point north of town, and this is surrounded by I believe it's the Chukchi Sea. This is a polar bear that was in the Anchorage airport in 2017. Unfortunately, in 2019, they didn't have the exhibit up anymore. But in 2017, the day after our group was in Barrow, they had a polar bear come through town. We missed it, and I don't know if that was good fortune or bad. I'm not sure. In 2019, we saw lemmings, and this is a lemming photographed at one of the little birding spots. And the trash bird in Barrow is snow bunting. They're all over the place. You can't miss them, and they're singing and displaying and nesting. Oh, and more Lapland longspurs, they're around too. And the long-tailed ducks put on quite a show. And the red phalaropes and breeding plumage. There's another bird that you see occasionally in migration in Texas, especially in the fall. And man, in Barrow in early June, they are all out over the place. This is a photograph that I took of a pair of red phalaropes. Literally, I was about 6 feet away from these birds. I took it I was walking at midnight, and I took it with my short lens. Hoary redpolls and common redpolls is maybe a hoary. I kind of think it might be a common, but we get both hoary and common redpoll. This is definitely a common redpoll. We get good looks at redpolls and barrows. We also usually have redpolls along some of the roads in Nome, but we get really great looks at them in Barrow. Snow buntings. There's a guy who has feeders at his house, and the redpolls and snow buntings come there. It's pretty awesome. And the eiders. This is a big attraction one of the big attractions of Barrow in early June is you can get all 4 eider species. This is spectacled eider. This is Steller's eider. Oh, and then there's Savin's gull. And this is a beautiful, beautiful bird. And it's hard to see in Texas. We have them here occasionally. I can think of 2 records, I think, in the last few years in Travis County, 1 record for sure. But man, they're in breeding plumage in Barrow. And you get lucky, the fly close enough for really great photos. It's just a beautiful bird. That black and white on the wings, gray mantle, slightly wedge-shaped tail, this black head, black bill with a yellow tip. Awesome. I just learned that this photo is going to be featured in a new guide that's going to be published by Princeton Press on gull identification. Pair of Savins gulls. So Barrow, Randy and I really love Barrow. Most people, though, you spend a day and a half in Barrow, and most people are pretty much done with it, including most birders. So we head back to Anchorage, and this was the moose. This was the cow moose that we had in 2017 in a yard, just 2 or 3 blocks from the hotel. We saw her. This is one evening. This is like 10 or 10:30 in the evening. We saw her on the way back from dinner. Dipper. This may be a time when we'll spend part of a day going to the park where the dippers hang out. They're awesome birds. And after we do a little bit of birding there, then we drive in 2019, then we get in vans. We rent a couple of big vans, and we drive. It's about a 3-hour drive, 3.5 hour. We drive from Anchorage up to the Denali area. And this was the view at, I think, 4 in the morning outside the little lodge that we stayed at near Denali Park. And this is I think some unnamed mountains and a lake here where there were buffleheads and scaup. Some places there, surprisingly few birds, but then every once in a while you hit some, but the scenery's great. And so we got on a bus, a shuttle bus in Denali Park, and we all got on, they call them the green bus. And the drivers will stop if you see stuff by the side of the road. And we got more willow ptarmigans. Black scoter, I can't remember whether we had this. Black scoter is not from Alaska, I don't think, but we can get all 3 scoters up there. Fox sparrow for sure, in areas with trees, in wet areas. In 2017, we had a northern hawk owl along the old Denali Highway, and we pulled up on the highway, and it's a great bird. We missed it in 2019. We were definitely on the lookout for it. They're just very low density birds. And in 2017, we stopped on the Denali Highway, and there was saw another vehicle coming. It was not a big work truck or something. I figured it was a birder. Randy and I wanted to talk with the guy. So we got out, and sure enough, it was a birder. And we got to talk with him, and the guy said, well, he'd been on the lookout for hawk owl because there'd been one reported on this section of the old Denali Highway sometime recently. And Jim Hailey then told the guy, well, I've been birding here 10 years and I've never seen a hawk owl up here. And we got back in the vans and we drove for about 20 minutes or so. And then one of our sharp-eyed birders said, hawk owl. We got out, and there it was, and it was great. Awesome, awesome bird. Cliff swallows. So this is a photograph that I took of cliff swallow up there. Cliff swallow is all the way up there, way up north in Alaska. They don't make it all the way up to Barrow, but they're all the way up there to Denali Park. So just think, some of the cliff swallows that you see migrating past here in the fall or in the spring, they could be headed up to Alaska. Me and Randy, this is the old Denali Highway. This is the Denali Range, but is not Denali Peak. This is 2017. This is 2019. One of the reasons that Randy and I decided to go to Denali National Park instead of old Denali Highway is that we saw almost no large mammals along old Denali Highway in 2017, and we were kind of disappointed. And I thought, if we go to Denali National Park, I think we've got a better chance of seeing mammals. And sure enough, we did. We got a grizzly bear that came right by the bus. I mean, I was on the wrong side of the bus. The people on the driver's side of the bus literally had this bear walking, 15 feet from them. We're taking, full frame iPhone photos. Awesome. This is and I think it's an Arctic ground squirrel up there. This is a hoary marmot, I think. Hoary something or other. These are Barrow's golden eyes. And we saw in 2017, we had Barrow's golden eyes on the little lake near the hotel in Anchorage. And they're not terribly uncommon there, but we missed them there in 2017, but we got them in Denali Park in 2019. This is Mirror Lake. This is kind of the end of the road for the green bus in Denali National Park. And man, it is mosquito heaven. So I'll just give you a tip. If you go camping up there and you're going to pick a place to go tent camping, do not pick Mirror Lake. Golden Eagle, I think, yeah, that's Golden Eagle. So we see bald eagles, you know, regularly in the Anchorage area and in Seward, but in the Denali Range and up in the mountains, you can get golden eagles. And we had a golden eagle. And sharp-eyed Jeff Patterson, when we were about to hit the highway and head back to Anchorage after our Denali Park experience, he said, something's over there on that pole. I think it's a raptor. And sure enough, it was a juvenile goshawk. And everybody got great scope looks at this juvenile goshawk. We missed goshawk in 2017, except 2 trip participants saw one, but most of the group missed it. Great bird. And so then we drive back to Anchorage, and then our last leg of the trip is a short drive. It's about a 2-hour drive. We get in our big vans again. Usually what we've done is we just keep them overnight, and we head out real early the next morning. We drive down to Seward. And here's like a typical, this is one of our vans that we drove in 2019. And that was also 2019. So Seward is down here on the coast, and they're in this coastal rainforest, and they're also on salt water. And Seward is the northernmost year-round ice-free port in Alaska. And it's an awesome place. In 2019, it was a lot of fog, and so we didn't have blue skies, but it's a beautiful, beautiful place any time of year. Sea otters there, easy to see. Cormorants, multiple species of cormorants, bald eagles, glaucous gulls, again. Glaucous winged gulls, another big gull. And something that's probably a glaucous wing herring gull hybrid. Kittiwakes. And more mammals, big guys, stellar sea lion. And one of the real attractions, birds of this trip, is red-faced cormorant. Got to get on a boat and get back into these places where these birds hang out in these kind of grottos, dark grottos where they breed. And we got great looks at one in 2017 and again 2019. Multiple alcids. I think we get 9 species of alcids on the trip. This is a pigeon guillemot. Rhinoceros auklet, get those. Rhino auklet. Get two types of puffins, 2 flavors. Tufted puffin. That's a tufted puffin. And horned puffin. See the little horn above the eye. Boat trip is great. Horned puffin in flight. Little flying footballs. Horned puffin. Oh, and then little merlets. Ancient merlet. Ancient merlet up a little closer. Oh, marbled merlet. And then to get one of the real mega specialties up there, Kitlitz's merlet, you gotta get up to the Tidewater glaciers where they're really coming in. And there's Kitlitz's merlet. And that's one of the main things main birds that we target. We target that bird really hard on this trip because that's a primo bird. Kitlitz's merlet. This is almost an Alaska endemic. Alaska is about the only place where you can go regularly and see Kitlitz's merlet. And the glaciers are melting fast, so get up there. First chance you have. Pair of Kitlitz's merlets. I think this was in 2017, but we got good looks at them in 2017 also. And here's typical, pieces of ice coming from the glacier in the water. And there are other boats up there, mostly looking at glaciers. There's Randy with the mountain in the background. Here's our group again. Gus couldn't hide this time. No hiding for Gus. And here, it looks like you're pretty close, this glacier. That's probably well over a mile away, that glacier. We're at least a mile away from that glacier. This is a little piece of ice with something in it. This is a Captain Tanya showing us something. Captain Tanya again. Tanya and her first mate and the boat that we use. So one of the advantages of going with a group of 10 to 14 people is that we can charter a boat and have the whole boat to ourselves for the day. And there's some advantages to that. You can do a good trip, a very good birding trip to Alaska on your own, and you can get on boats like this, but if you don't, if you're not the only party on the boat, then, they may spend more time, looking at otters and stuff than trying to get kitlets and merlets. And this is Tanya and Callie, who was her first mate in 2017, and Callie's now a captain herself. And here we are. Here's our group at the table in Seward. I promise everybody they can get great food in Seward. So they, and we did. I think they call this place something like the Salt Table or something like that. Anyway, it was good food. And song sparrows there. You get the dark coastal Alaskan song sparrow, very cool bird. They don't make them like this in Texas. And singing. And then there's a place, Ava's Place. Ava's Place has feeders. So the morning after our boat trip, we do some land birding in Seward. And one of the attractions is pine grosbeaks, both genders. And here is Gus. This is in the touristy part. And Gus wanted to try his hand at sled dogging. Mush them one more time,
Hold on,
Gus.
Sit down.
That's it. Get those guys going. Yeah, that's Gus, man. Slave driver Gus, that's him. I think that's Kittiwake again. And then we drive back to Anchorage and we say goodbye to the redneck grebes and the Chugach Mountains. And we may have one more chance to check out the Arctic terns at the Anchorage Coastal Wildlife Refuge. And there's Randy. That's a photograph I call Bad Randy. Bad Randy. Remember about not supposed to molest those birds? Anyway, that's Alaska. It's great. And I hope that we can go back in 2021. And thank you all for listening. I hope you're able to see and hear. And I'll take questions now if we're still doing that.
Thanks so much, Byron.
Welcome.
There is a question that I will read. Relatively speaking, you showed 2 pictures of raptors. Is it because they're more rare in Alaska compared to Texas?
Yes, that's a good question. And from a very astute raptorologist who must have had an excellent teacher. So thank you, David, for the question. The raptors, they're further and farther between in Alaska. So there are some places in Alaska where you can see good concentrations of migrating raptors, but the places that we go, they're on territory and they're breeding and they're the birds, except for right along the coast, birds and mammals are not extremely abundant in these places. And so predators need very large areas to be successful. And so they're kind of widely spaced. But we do get, we've had red-tailed hawks. We get Harlan's hawks up there, not very many of them. We've had rough-legged hawk, both trips, good looks at rough-legged hawk. We get peregrine falcons. We've had those both trips, and of course, bald eagles, golden eagle. On the 2019 trip, we had awesome looks at an adult gyrfalcon that was interacting with the rough-legged hawk. But yes, in general, the raptors are low density. But the other thing is that some of the birds up there, like the Jaegers, they're essentially raptors. So they are predatory birds that fill a niche there that's not occupied by a local, regular kind of raptor that we would think of.
There was another question about what the temperatures are like. It looked cold in some of those pictures.
What the temperatures are like?
In June.
Yeah. So there are two places where it's genuinely cold, and actually the coldest place is on the boat trip. So that's the most continuously cold portion of the trip, because you're out on, if you've ever been out on a boat, on a small boat over the Pacific Ocean, now that water is very cold, at least the North American, off the west coast of North America. And so it's cold out there, and there are also glaciers all around, and we're pretty far north. So I tell people to really dress up, have plenty of layers and gloves and warm hats on the boat trip. Now in Barrow, we're up on the tundra, and there's still snow on the ground, and it's pretty cold there, but by Alaska standards, it's not real cold. When we're there in early June, the temperatures are starting to get above freezing there in Barrow, and so the lows will be in Barrow. The lows will be in the mid-20s, and highs will be in the low 30s there. The other places that we visit, to my way of thinking, are not that cold, but I'm also the person who gave our raptor trip group who went to Duluth a couple of autumns ago. I gave them a forecast and told them exactly what the temp was going to be, and there might be a light snow early on, and that was all true. And I told them it's going to be very windy, and they should dress up and wear gloves and warm stuff. And then I was taken to task for not telling them how cold it was going to be. So I don't know. I don't think it's that cold. There are mosquitoes most places. So how cold can it be with mosquitoes? I don't know. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. Unfortunately, we need to wrap up, but can people email you if they have more questions or want recommendations for Alaska? Great. We'll provide Byron's email address whenever we post the recording. Yep. But thanks everybody for being here. Thanks you so much, Dr. Birdie, for talking with us tonight. And this is our last speaker series. We take a break for the summer, but we'll have a lot of opportunities to engage with some virtual topics that are of interest to birders over the summer. So stay tuned to our website. And be well, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.